Gravitas Crunch started with a simple feeling. I wanted to turn on the news, hear real reporting, and go straight to the source the moment something mattered. The killer feature of Gravitas Crunch is not a model name. It is not a benchmark. It is not even the interface, although I care deeply about that. The killer feature is that I can just turn it on and get news on the hour, not AI slop, not synthetic filler. Real sources, real publications, the kind of editorial you would actually trust with your attention. The kind of reporting that makes you stop what you are doing and tap open article because the imagery is too good, the story is too important, or the imagery is too important. The details are too rich to leave at the summary layer. That single transition says almost everything about the app. You hear the story. You open the source. You crunch it into understanding. You ask questions. You tap a citation and jump right back to the exact passage in the reader. That is the loop. What looks from the outside like a futuristic AI radio app is really the result of a much longer chain of ideas. Gravitas Crunch did not start as radio. It started as a reader, then kept pulling the next system into existence. Each piece created the need for the next one. The story of the app is really the story of that chain. It started with a reader. I built Gravitas Crunch as a researcher. That matters because it shaped the product from the beginning. I did not want a toy summarizer. I wanted a place where I could actually live with information. I wanted to bring an article, a PDF, an EPUB, or a URL into an environment that respected the source, looked beautiful, and felt good enough to spend real time in. The first truth I ran into was simple. A reader cannot be dead. A lot of digital reading feels static and utilitarian. It gets the job done, but it does not feel like a medium. I wanted something with atmosphere, something with motion, something that felt closer to motion graphics than a white page with text dumped on it. I have always loved futuristic interfaces, especially the kind that feel cinematic rather than merely technical, and I wanted some of that energy here. So the reader became more than a document view. It became a stage. On some platforms, the article can auto-scroll so the page itself has movement. Images can rise into a lightbox carousel above the text so reading starts to feel a little like watching. There is a visualizer. There is glass. There is glow. There is a sense that the source is alive in front of you rather than frozen on the page. That is where the project began, not with AI, but with the belief that source material deserved a better home. A reader is only as good as what it can open. Once I had a reader, the next problem appeared immediately. A beautiful reader is useless if it only works with a narrow, tidy set of inputs. Real research is messy. Real media is messy. People do not live in one file type or one publishing platform. So the app had to learn how to open the world. That meant resolvers. Gravitas Crunch can read and present PDFs, EPUBs, URLs, feeds, and a range of real publishing platforms. It grew resolvers for places like WordPress, Medium, Substack, Arxiv, PubMed, DOI-based sources, code, and more. It can also resolve media from platforms like YouTube, Vimeo, and Reddit. Some sources need metadata extraction. Some need content cleanup. Some need platform-specific handling. Some need to respect premium access. Some are mostly text. Some are part text, part media, part structure. That work was not glamorous, but it was foundational. A source-aware app cannot treat the web like one giant undifferentiated blob. A paper is not a newsletter. A newsletter is not a blog post. A blog post is not a podcast episode. A podcast is not a PDF. Each one arrives with different structure, different context, and different expectations. The resolver layer was how all of those disparate things could be turned into a coherent internal model. In other words, the reader forced me to build a language for content. Discovery had to be part of the product, not an afterthought once the app could open source as well. Another question appeared. How do those sources get there? I did not want discovery to feel generic. I wanted it to feel editorial. So I built discovery around a search system that uses Google as the backbone, but routes through tailored engines for different content types. Feed discovery behaves differently than EPUB discovery. The why is not the same as PubMed. Medium is not the same as Substack. Code is not the same as a news article. Each engine is trying to find the right kind of thing, not just anything that matches a string. That matters because discovery shapes the quality of the whole experience. If the inputs are low quality, the outputs are low quality. If the inputs are generic, the whole product starts to feel generic. But if discovery is source-aware and editorially grounded, then the rest of the system has real material to work with. This is one of the reasons the app feels different to me. It is not generating a fake world. It is curating access to the real one. That distinction matters more than almost anything else. Then came the real problem. There is too much worth reading. The web does not have an information shortage. It has a backlog problem. There is far more worth reading than most people have time to read. Articles are long. Papers are dense. Books are huge. Even when the source is excellent, the cost of keeping up can be too high. That is where Crunch came from. Once you open a source in Gravitas Crunch, the major call to action is not read more. It is crunch. There is even a little subtitle beneath it. Don't just read it, crunch it. That line gets at the heart of what I wanted the app to do. Crunch is not a one-line summary. It is not a lazy paraphrase. It is the system's comprehension engine. Long-form content is broken into chunks, summarized at the chunk level, and assembled into a structured outline. That outline becomes a working representation of the source, something far more usable than the raw document alone. Still grounded enough to preserve its shape and meaning. I designed multiple ways to crunch content, because different reading goals require different compression. Sometimes you want an executive view. Sometimes you want a technical lens. Sometimes you want a study guide. And sometimes you want what I call focus. A question-directed pass over the full source, where the summarization itself is guided by what you want to know. That last part is important. A lot of summarization is neutral by default. It reduces everything evenly. But real questions are not neutral. If you feed the system a novel and ask about a specific character's journey, the goal should not be to flatten the whole book into a general-purpose recap. The goal should be to compress the book in a way that serves that question. That is what focus is for. Research was the natural next step. Once Crunch existed, the app stopped being just a reader. It became a research assistant. The moment a source has been crunched into a structured outline, you no longer have to treat it as a wall of text. You can read the outline directly. You can use it as a quick way back into the source. You can work from it. You can chat against it. You can use it to generate something larger and more specific. You can even export notes to PDF. This was a big shift for me. I did not want research to feel like throwing a document into a black box, and did not want research to feel like getting back an answer you could not inspect. I wanted it to feel like turning a source into a usable knowledge object, something you could return to, something you could probe, something that gave you leverage over long-form content instead of simply reducing it. That is what Crunch really became. Not just a summary action, but a compilation step for understanding. Answers had to show their work. The next problem was trust. The moment you add an assistant layer to content, you risk floating away from the source. A lot of AI experiences feel that way to me. They are smooth but untethered. They talk confidently, but the underlying material is hidden. I did not want that. So, when the research assistant returns an answer, it can also return citation buttons. Tap one, and you jump directly to the exact spot in the reader that supports the point. That feature changed the feel of the whole product. Suddenly, the assistant was not speaking in the air. It was rooted in the source. The source was still primary. The assistant was a guide, not a replacement. It could help you move faster, but it could also bring you right back to the text, the passage, the evidence. That is the line I cared about preserving. Gravitas Crunch does not hide the source. It brings you back to it. Radio was not the beginning. It was the inheritance of everything before it. People tend to understand the app first through robot radio because it is easy to grasp. Turn your feeds into a station, press play, let it run. But the reason robot radio works is that all the earlier systems already existed. The app already knew how to open sources. It already knew how to normalize them. It already knew how to chunk them. It already knew how to turn them into structured understanding. It already knew how to preserve a path back to the source. Radio emerged when I realized all of that understanding could be turned into a listening medium. That required another transformation layer. Anchor mode. Anchor mode takes the structured understanding of a source and rewrites it for the ear. It is not enough to simply read article prose aloud. Written prose and spoken presentation are not the same medium. So the app packages the story like a broadcast segment. It shapes utterances for delivery. It rewrites in a news anchor style. It spells out acronyms and abbreviations so they sound right when spoken. It uses Apple Intelligence to segment text into more natural utterances before synthesis. And it can choose bumper music based on the tone and type of the story from a library of authored tracks tagged with metadata for mood and use. That is an important design philosophy for me. I did not want the model inventing the whole experience from scratch. I wanted it orchestrating a design system, choosing, packaging, and composing inside constraints that I authored. The music is curated. The metadata is curated. The broadcast rules are curated. The model's job is judgment. That is what makes the segments feel cohesive. And then there was the engineering reality behind it. Text-to-speech is computationally expensive. High-quality playback cannot stutter every time a story changes. Some parts of the pipeline can run in parallel, but others cannot. So I had to build a compute-ahead rendering pipeline that could stay ahead of playback, time pauses correctly, and keep the station feeling seamless. I also had to be disciplined enough to let very long items go when necessary so one giant source would not hijack the listening experience. That was brutal work. But it was worth it, because once it came together, the app crossed the threshold. It stopped feeling like a feature. It started feeling like a medium. Audiobook mode took the same foundation in a different direction. Radio is discovery. Audiobook mode is depth. Once a story catches your attention, and you open the source, there are times when you do not want a radio segment. You want the full thing. You want the article, the essay, the paper, the EPUB, the long-form piece, and you want it narrated in a way that lets you stay with it. That required a different orchestration pipeline. Radio has to move. It has to keep the broadcast alive. Audiobook mode can linger. It can honor the full structure of the source. It can live much closer to the original while still benefiting from all the work that went into utterance quality, pacing, and presentation. I love that the same source can move through both modes. You can hear the high-level segment first, then you can open the article. Then you can switch into a deeper listening mode and stay with it longer. That is the kind of continuity I wanted the product to have all along. A station is only as good as its editorial. None of the radio work would matter without the feed network. Gravitas Crunch has a curated library of feeds across news, politics, business, tech, science, space, gaming, entertainment, beauty, DIY, sports, real estate, health, justice, and more. The point is not sheer quantity for its own sake. The point is that the editorial quality is high enough to sustain listening. That is what made me realize the product had something real. I could leave it on and actually want to keep listening. The app can create different station experiences from that network. There is now radio, which sweeps through the latest items from the broader library and your own feeds. There is My Station, which is where the product becomes truly personal. You can follow feeds, reorder the broadcast, shuffle, go back through history, choose exactly what participates, and shape the station the way you want it. That is when the app stopped feeling like an app and started feeling like a personal channel. And the beautiful part is that this works at both a broad and intimate scale. One day, it can be a constant stream of world news. Another day, it can be a station built around a narrow interest. It can even become a custom editorial space for another person entirely. The real destination is a personal broadcast. This is the part I love most. At the end of the chain, Gravitas Crunch is not just a reader, not just a research assistant, and not just a radio app. It is a way of turning trusted sources into a personal broadcast. That phrase gets at something deeper than feature count. Personal broadcast is not the same thing as a recommendation feed. It is not an algorithm guessing what will keep you scrolling. It is something more intentional. It is built from the publications you trust, the subjects you care about, the sources you follow, the research you save, the way you like to listen, and the questions you bring to long-form material. It is a medium shaped around your mind. That is why the product feels so different to me from generic AI wrappers. It is not generating substitute content. It is creating a new way to move through real content. I designed each Apple platform as its own experience. Because the medium changes, the form factor has to change too. Gravitas Crunch is multi-platform, but I never wanted that to mean one interface stretched across every device. Each platform got its own care. On iPhone, the app feels intimate and immediate. It is the quickest way to turn on the station, open a story, and keep moving. On iPad, the reader has room to breathe. It becomes a more relaxed canvas for reading, browsing, and shifting between listening and source work. On macOS, the product becomes a workstation. Discovery, source reading, and research can live together on screen in a way that makes the whole architecture visible at once. On Apple Vision Pro, the spatial and cinematic side of the app becomes especially meaningful. Images, motion, article surfaces, and PO atmosphere all have room to become part of the experience instead of just the frame around it. Across the platforms, I used Apple's liquid glass as a starting point, but pushed it into a softer frosted glass look that felt more like light diffusing through a material than hard glossy shine. I borrowed from my background in graphics and from the motion design I love. Subtle refraction, layered glow, auto-scrolling surfaces, a visualizer that reflects the inner life of the pipeline, and an overall sense that the app is not merely presenting information, but staging it. I wanted every platform to feel like the same world, expressed differently. What I really built from the outside, the easiest way to describe Gravitas Crunch is still robot radio. That is the hook. That is the thing people immediately understand. But the truth is that the app is a chain of systems built on top of a single idea. Real sources deserve a better way to be found, read, understood, heard, and returned to. That idea became a reader. The reader became resolvers. Resolvers forced discovery. Discovery demanded better summarization. Summarization became research. Research required citations. Citations kept the source alive. All of that became radio. Radio expanded into audiobook mode. The feed network became stations. The stations became a personal broadcast. So yes, the killer feature is that I can turn it on and get news on the hour. But the reason that feature feels magical is everything underneath it. Gravitas Crunch is my attempt to turn the web, documents, and long-form media into something you can actually live with. A reader when you need source truth, a research assistant when you need understanding, and a broadcast when you simply want the world to start talking. That is the product. Hear the story, open the source, crunch it, ask it, verify it, keep going.